Good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Jacqueline Suddy and I'm the North American representative from FSSC 22000. And I'd like to take this opportunity of thanking PJR and PJR FSI for this opportunity to talk to you today, as their combined expertise is in both the ISO-based systems and in food safety certification programs. We're pleased to partner with them in presenting this webinar. So today I'm going to talk about FSSC 22000, and I've entitled the webinar Reintroducing FSSC 22000. Although some of you may already be very familiar with the system, we have been through a period of change. We're growing our team, we're developing the program, hopefully to meet your needs. So it's a great opportunity to talk to you, to just update you on what we've been up to. So what I want to talk to you about today is just reintroduce, as I said, what is FSSC 22000, what comprises the program, and what is in FSSC 22000 version 4.1. We have recently revised the program. I'll explain why and what the new version has brought us and what it means to those companies that are already FSSC certified and also to those that are considering certification. And also a question that's on everybody's mind at the moment in the US and overseas is what to do about FSMA. How does FSSC 22000 certification help us with the Food Safety Modernization Act? And if we're FSSC 22000 certified, does that mean that we meet the requirements of FSMA? So we're going to go into a little bit of detail of that and how we can help you, and also just finish up with why should we use FSSC 22000 as a certification program. So having said that, what is FSSC 22000? It is a mouthful, and even for me that says it nearly every day, I still manage to stumble over the S's and the C's. But FSSC stands for Food Safety System Certification 22000. It's a GFSI benchmarked food safety certification program. It's a little bit different from some of the other schemes because it is based on the international standard, the ISO 22000 Food Safety Management System. And this is an international program. This is an international standard. It's recognized all over the world. And some countries actually use it as their regulatory standard for food safety. So it's well known. It's developed by consensus. It's not something that FSSC develops. It is an existing ISO standard. And we use that as our framework. FSSC 22000 was developed at the request of the industry in order to make ISO 22000 compliant with GFSI. I'm sure everybody who's online is familiar with GFSI, which was founded in around 2000 by leading retailers and food companies in an effort to harmonize the food safety certification activities that were going on at the time. And to reduce the number of audits that manufacturers were being submitted to. At the time, the ISO 22000 management system wasn't available. It only became available in 2005. And at that time, it didn't meet the requirements of the GFSI. So FSSC 22000 was developed in order to make the ISO 22000 GFSI compliant. It is an accredited system. It's accredited to ISO 17021. And the ISO 17021 is an accreditation for a management system audit. It's not a product audit system. It's not a product audit. It's a management system audit. So when you're certified to FSSC 22000, your whole management system and process is evaluated by the certification body. And the ISO 22000 system provides that framework. And I'll go into a little bit more detail about the benefits and what that means to you throughout the webinar. It provides accredited certification to some of the world's largest companies. It's not exclusive for the major manufacturers, but it is a great benefit to the major manufacturers. And the benefit is bestowed by the international framework, the international perspective of the ISO 22000 framework. It means that it provides a common language, both between companies and between facilities within a company. Many of the manufacturers have manufacturing facilities all over the world, and by using the ISO 22000 management framework, it means that they can all use the same system. And it's also beneficial, of course, for supplier customer relationships in using the same system and understanding. So it's a method of harmonization similar to the way that GFSI also aims at harmonization of food safety systems. So as I said, FSSC 22000 was developed in order to make ISO 22000 GFSI compliant. And in order to make a system GFSI compliant, it has to be owned. And FSSC 22000 is owned by a foundation, which is a non-profit organization. The central office is actually based in the Netherlands, but we have global reach. We're fairly small, although we are expanding. And we have members of staff as a team based all over the world. As an organization, we don't actually develop the standard, we develop the governance. And in order to develop the governance, we have input from a board of stakeholders and an advisory committee. And the board of stakeholders is comprised of representatives from all the food sectors, and the advisory committee also has input from certification bodies, from retailers, and other interested parties. So that gives us a wide view. We don't make up a standard, for our own purposes. We do have a very robust integrity program, which is extremely important to the scheme to provide confidence and consistency, because we're operating all over the world. We have a communication team and a market development team with representatives in the US, like myself, in South America, and also in Japan. We have members of our integrity program in Asia, in the Americas, and in Europe. So as although we're small, as an international organization, we have quite wide reach, but again, its focus is the non-profit basis, and all the funds generated go into the integrity program in the interest of maintaining the consistency and the reliance of the certification program. So we are growing. We're growing really quite fast, and we have now over 18,000 certificates worldwide. And although we really have only been in existence since about when we were developed in 2009, 2010, so we've seen some rapid growth. And we're working with certification bodies all over the world. And this means that companies that are all over the world can work with local certification bodies and local accreditation bodies. We're active, we have certificates or certified facilities in 154 countries, and we're working with about 1,500 auditors. So as I mentioned, in order to maintain the reliability and consistency of the certificates, our integrity program and our reach is extremely important to the foundation. So most of our resources is focused really in the integrity program rather than in marketing the organization. So global growth, as I mentioned, we're growing very fast, and we're continuing to see this growth we're probably divided around a third in Europe, a third in the Americas, and a third in Asia, and continuing to grow very fast. So let's go back to the scheme. And as I mentioned, FSSC 22000 is based on the ISO 22000 framework. This is the international system, the international management system, which is used all over the world. And this provides a common framework for the food safety management system. And this is applicable to companies all across the supply chain. So it provides the basic essential elements required for a food safety management system. This needs to be supported by what we refer to as prerequisite programs. And there are prerequisite programs that apply to certain different sectors of the supply chain. An example of this is the ISO TS 22002.1 for food manufacturing. And this provides the basic elements required for the hygienic and sanitary production of food. So it covers many of the good manufacturing practices specific to food manufacturing. For packaging or for animal feed, there is also a sector-specific prerequisite program that defines the requirements for that sector. And these all are required by ISO 22000 in order to maintain the certification program. And then around that is the additional FSSC 22000 requirements. And these are the requirements that FSSC is responsible for. And these are the requirements that maintain our integrity program. They provide governance, oversight and management for the scheme. And all three elements are required to make the certification program recognized by the Global Food Safety Institute. So that's why FSSC exists. It exists as a composite scheme to make ISO 22000 GFSI benchmark, so that the system that is recognized all over the world is also benchmarked and recognized by the GFSI. So just to go through some of the details of that scheme. So the ISO 22000, in order to be FSSC certified, you have to meet the requirements of all those three components. And as I mentioned, the first component is the ISO 22000 management system. And it's a risk-based management system. And it defines the specifics for the organization and operational control of a food safety manufacturing facility. It defines the requirements for leadership. It defines the need for resources and specifies the process for the evaluation and the improvement of a food safety management system. The food safety plan is based on Codex. So it is an HACCP plan supported by the prerequisite programs or operational prerequisite programs that are inherent in the ISO 22000 management framework. It requires verification, validation, implementation, and documentation, and the analysis of the scheme, the reanalysis, internal audits, constant updating, and continual improvement. And that's the basis of the food safety management system. And familiar to many of you that are used to the ISO-based approach is the plan, do, check, act method. And it provides that capacity for implementation, validation, and continual improvement. So it's a constant process of maintaining the food safety based on HACCP. And the prerequisite programs, which is the second part of the FSSC 22000, are the sector-specific requirements for the different parts of the supply chain. Like the ISO 22000 standard, these also are produced by consensus, and they begin life either as a publicly available statement and eventually are upgraded to an ISO standard or an ISO technical statement. And as I mentioned before, these really define the requirements out, sort of basing as a basis of the GMPs, and they'll cover elements such as the design of the buildings and the machinery, the waste disposal, the role of the utilities, the requirements for sanitation and personal hygiene, management of people, workforce, materials, and the supply chain. And these are going to be different, obviously, depending on the sector. And as we expand across the supply chain, you can see how these, the different prerequisite programs, they're all supported by the ISO 22000 management system and with ISO 22003, which are the requirements governing the certification bodies. And each of the prerequisite programs fit with ISO 22000 and the FSSC additional requirements. So we have ISO 22002.1 for manufacturing, 2.4 for the production of food manufacturing packaging, for the manufacture of food packaging and food packaging materials, 2.6 for the manufacture of animal feed, 2.3 for primary animal production, and the new NTA 8059 for transport and storage, 2.2 for catering, and the PAS 22.1 for retail. And again, these will eventually be upgraded to an ISO standard, and in combination with the ISO 22000 framework, any of these prerequisite programs can be used for certification at the different sectors of the supply chain to achieve FSSC 22000 certification. And then on top of that is the FSSC additional scheme requirements. And these are the requirements that define those specifications for the accreditation process and the accreditation bodies to make sure that everybody is harmonized and in sync with the requirements. It defines the requirements for the certification, and the certification process provides the governance and the integrity. And this is the section that allows for the GFSI benchmarking. And in contrast to the ISO 22000 management system and the ISO technical standards prerequisite programs, the scheme requirements are adjustable. So those are those for us to improve the governance in the integrity program of FSSC 22000. These requirements are all available on the FSSC 22000 website, along with much other useful information. So I'm going to keep referring you back to the website, and I recommend paying that a visit for more information on how the scheme operates and news of FSSC and events. So I said that we were going to reintroduce FSSC 22000, and one of the reasons that we thought it was timely to do so is FSSC 22000 had a major revision last year to the version 4.1. And the revision was of the FSSC 22000 additional requirements. At this stage, it's not the revision of the ISO 22000 or the prerequisite programs. These are the update of our scheme requirements, which were published last July. And as from the beginning of this year, all facilities that are undergoing FSSC certification will be certified to version 4.1. And the reason that there was a need to update the scheme requirements is they hadn't been updated for some years. And also the GFSI was also revising their benchmarking requirements. And the benchmarking requirements are the minimum standards really for the certification programs, the requirements which certification have to meet in order to be recognised by the GFSI. And the benchmarking or the guidance document was being revised to 7.1. So in order to meet these revised requirements, FSSC 22000 also had to be revised. We're also going through a period of legislative reform in the food safety sector. So there was demands from the different regulatory authorities. We work with regulatory authorities all over the world, through Europe and of course in the US. And we're familiar with many of the legislative changes that were going on. So there is capacity within the additional requirements of FSSC to adjust these to close the gaps between the industrial certification programs or the private certification programs and the public legislative requirements. The revision also allowed us to add some new scopes, and previously FSSC was really just focused on food manufacturing and animal feed and packaging, and we were able to add the new scopes for transport and storage and retail and catering, and these are now available through licensed certification bodies from the beginning of this year. So there has been some changes. We are expanding the program and obviously undergone the major revision. So why did we revise FSSC, and what did the 4.1 bring? Well, first of all, it did bring the introduction of a requirement for unannounced audits. The FSSC 22000 audit cycle is a 3-year cycle. Certification lasts for 3 years, but each year has to bring, the facility is subject to a surveillance audit. And one of those 3 audits, one of the surveillance audits needs to be unannounced. And this is in order to close some of the gaps between some of the legislative requirements throughout the world and an appreciation for the need for unannounced audits in food manufacturing facilities. For a facility that is FSSC 22000 certified, this shouldn't be an issue, seeing as the audit is actually of the process rather than a product. So the process is continuous, and the facility should, of course, be audit ready at any time. But sometimes it could be a challenge to ensure that all the personnel are there, and also that the facility is in production, depending on the time of the year. And again, we can work with CVs and facilities in order to accommodate this. But obviously the need for an unannounced audit is obvious within the certification cycle. Version 4.1 also introduced the need for consideration of food fraud mitigation, and food defense. This is a requirement that was introduced by the GFSI in the revision of their benchmarking document, but of course it's also brought into focus by the introduction of FSMA. So there is now a need for companies to consider the risk of food fraud as part of the food safety management system. Food defense was already part of ISO 22000 for a need to consider the option to protect your facility from the possibility of initially bioterrorism or any terrorist threats or any other threat. But the version 4.1 redefines this and again incorporates it as part of the food safety management system. The management of allergens, environmental monitoring, and an upgrade of the non-conformity grading are also part of the new version of FSSC 22000. So these will have impact on a facility looking at FSSC 22000 in the future, or those that are already certified that will need to upgrade the management system in order to meet these requirements. We're also working towards a standard audit report template which makes it easier for businesses to work with FSSC 22000 and also to relate to, or to make the certification program more comprehensible to companies outside of the format, to work with the regulatory authorities also. So that's the key elements of version 4.1. And what have we found with the benefits of the revision? Obviously, the new FSSC 22000 meets the requirements of the GFSI version 7.1 benchmarking, and the new benchmarking is currently underway. This is a major part of also activities, so it is now open for consultation, stakeholder consultation. It's on the GFSI website, and we're very pleased to be progressing. And the benchmarking is undertaking the benchmarking of the manufacture of human food, of animal feed, of packaging materials, and of transport and storage. So these will be now presenting GFSI benchmark scopes in all those sectors, which is very exciting for FSSC 22000 and anyone else that is interested in FSSC 22000 certification. It's also helped with the cooperation of the regulatory authorities. Being international, as I mentioned, we're working with many of the other regulatory authorities, and they are talking to us about incorporating the option of recruiting FSSC 22000 as part of their the risk assessment in their own regulatory programs. And finally, it has improved our alignment with the Food Safety Modernisation Act. So we've revised FSSC, and we're also looking at FSMA. So I think one of the most often asked questions over the last few years directed at me is, if I am FSSC 22000 certified, do I meet the requirements of FSMA? And if you think about that, it's because we not only have companies that are based in the US that are subject to the requirements of the Food Safety Modernisation Act, but also we're working with companies overseas that are looking at the US as a market. So they have to meet the requirements of FSMA in order for their importers to meet the requirements of the Foreign Supplier Verification Program. So I'm sure many of you are familiar with the FSMA rules. We have 7 that are now final, and we are working, really our focus for the main part are the preventive controls for human food and the Foreign Supplier Verification Program. We will have impact in the sanitary transportation, and also our animal food scope will have impact on the preventive controls for animal food. But all of these rules are coming into focus for all of us. The compliance dates are passed for the major companies, and for the smaller companies, they're now well in our sight. So we want to work with our certified companies to help them in meeting the requirements of FSMA. So one of the early things that we did was to conduct a gap analysis using TAG, the Atchison Group, as an independent consultant, to compare the requirements of FSSC 22000 with those requirements of the preventive control rules for human food. As with many of the GFSI certification programs, they fared very well, and the outcome was that anyone who was GFSI certified was in a good place to meet the requirements of the Foreign Supplier of the Food Safety Modernisation Act. Because we were working with so many foreign facilities that were not always familiar with the Food Safety Modernisation Act, we wanted to find out what exactly being in a good place was. So we have conducted a line-by-line comparison of FSSC 22000 against the preventative controls for human food requirements. And this document is available on our website. And this is really can be used as a tool, companies all over the world, to see how they relate to the requirements of FSMA. And if you, not all requirements of FSMA are going to necessarily relate to your activities in the same way as not all the requirements of FSSC 22000 are going to relate to your activities. So this provides a tool to see how you match up against the requirements of the preventive controls rule. So there were some differences, obviously, that did arise, usually because the ISO 22000 framework defines what you need to do, and the FSMA requirements really define how you need to do it. And there are some gaps in some of the specific details as defined by the preventative controls rule. And so what we did was to produce a supplement. And again, this is available on the website as a tool for companies that are FSSC 22000 certified that want to see how they line up with FSMA. And this details those missing elements, some of which are specific details, some of which are terminology, and some of it is timing, like the timing of the retention of documentation. Many companies have found that they are FSMA compliant just by completing the certification, and others have found that they need to have some additional translation or redefinition of some of the terms they use in order to put it into the language of the FDA, or they might need to turn some attention to some of the specific details. So this is a tool. It doesn't define compliance. The only people that can actually confer compliance is the FDA, but this is a tool for our certified facilities to help them meet the requirements of FSMA. And it's been of use to both companies in the US and outside of the US. So after that, the question was, how do I know that my supplier is meeting the requirements of the supplement? So we have the supplement available. It provides an opportunity to conduct a gap analysis. It identifies those differences where you may need to put a little bit more detail into your documentation, into your sign-offs, and into your specifications. But how do we know that my supplier is meeting the requirements of the supplement? So it became apparent that there was a need for an audit addendum, or an addition, to show that the FSMA specifics were actually considered by facilities within the supply chain that were obviously in your eyesight as part of your need to verify your supplier. So we have produced just earlier this year, it was published, a FSMA addendum, an FSSC 22000 FSMA addendum for the production of human food. And within this is explains some of the terminology that is used by the FDA, and how it highlights some of the specific requirements of FSMA. It also explains the requirement for the preventive controls and the terminology used, such as the emphasis on the supply chain and the requirement for documentation. So all those key elements that FSMA really hones in on, because FSMA really is focused on the safety of imported foods. The report, we found that the addendum is meeting a need to bridge that gap, and we feel that we're in a good position with our network of sort of 18,000 certified companies all over the world looking at the US market, that this should help with raising the standard of food safety of food coming into the US. So within that report addition, is the key. And this is the information that can accompany an FSSC 22000 report up the supply chain to fill in those details in order to meet those requirements of FSMA. And it's a voluntary addition. You do not have to complete the FSMA edition if you're FSSC 22000 certified. This is only if you are supplying a company that needs to meet the requirements of foreign of either the Foreign Supplier Verification Program or FSMA for verification of the supply chain from their suppliers. And in this report is a requirement for the documentation of the preventive controls, any corrective actions identified during the audit by the auditor, and attestation that the audit was conducted by a qualified auditor that knows about FSMA. So this really is just information being passed up the supply chain, that your supplier is familiar with the needs of FSMA, that it's meeting those requirements, and that it is producing food as is required of them to meet the same level of protecting human health. So it's a tool. It's not compulsory, but we have found that it is being well met and appreciated, and is meeting a need. It does come with a few provisos, though, and as I said, we do not confer compliance. We think that it will be a help for companies to meet the requirements of FSMA, but we don't use it to confer compliance. We strongly believe that only the FDA can do that. It's not yet recognized by the FDA. No system at this time is recognized by the FDA as showing FSMA compliance. But it can be used as part of the process of supply verification. The FDA does recognize the value of third-party certification audits, provided that they show that they fill in all the gaps between the third-party audit and the FSMA requirements. It's not a replacement for the FDA third-party accredited audit that would be used in the process of BCRIT, but it does provide a means of supplier verification. It does need to be conducted by competent auditors, as mentioned in the report, and it can be used for supply chain verification. We do feel that it contributes to transparency in the supply chain, and we also believe that it helps companies learn about FSMA, and that confirms awareness of FSMA by your supplier as it's coming towards you. It provides a capacity to report that you are familiar with those requirements, and provides the details that are required for preventive control rules for human food. Also animal food, if you are providing the animal food. We don't have an alignment published for animal food at this time. That will be coming. And also for providing evidence of foreign supplier verification. And hopefully for building the bridge between public and private partnerships. I think we're all hopeful of sharing our expertise in this field for the continuing improvement of food safety. So I think I've hopefully brought you up to date on some of our changes, some of our developments of the revision of FSSC to 4.1, and now I just really want to talk about why would you use FSSC 22000, and what are the benefits of using FSSC 22000. So we did already mention that it's based on the international standards, and the benefits of being based on the international standards is the fact that it is an international standard, and that in a world of increasing, in a supply chain that is increasing in complexity, it does provide a common language of food safety around the world. In addition to having the 20,000, nearly 20,000 FSSC certificates, there are also out there probably over 30,000 facilities that are certified to ISO 22000. So while they may not be GFSI compliant, we can work with those facilities to bring them up to FSSC 22000, but that just shows you that there is this huge area of companies that are already on the path through ISO 22000. So it provides this common language of food safety around the world, both between countries, between companies, and between facilities within companies, for those companies that have facilities overseas. Because of our additional requirements and because of our unique capacity as a discrete foundation, we provide the capacity for ISO 22000 to be benchmarked by the GFSI. And the recognition by the GFSI provides that advantage of the business-to-business advantage. It has the advantage of being a common language in industry. So we have the double benefits that the GFSI is now recognized by retailers and companies throughout the world, and they have it has an added benefit for business. So we have the two benefits, the internationalness and the GFSI, and also we believe that we're contributing to alignment throughout the world with the requirements of FSMA by working with our companies and by spreading the word. So we have some additional benefits. The fact that we're governed by a non-profit organization with inputs from sectors throughout the supply chain does mean that we don't have a conflict of interest. We're not aligned with any particular sector or a trade association. We're completely independent, and we work for the industry, and we will develop, or we will work to take on an additional available prerequisite program to bring it under our organization and our integrity program if the need is there, if the market demands it. We wrote the addendum to meet the requirements of FSMA because the market demands it. We don't drive it from the outside. We're not profit driven. We're here to provide a service. We also offer FSSC 22000, which is a flexible food safety management system, and it's based on risks. So it's a small, so it doesn't need to be a large organization in order to benefit from FSSC 22000. A small company can develop a food safety management system. It's not a one-size-fits-all system. It's flexible, and because of the ISO 22000 framework, you can develop a tailored program to meet the requirements, whatever size company you are. As mentioned, we are an international organization with a robust integrity program, and this contributes to the reliability of the consistency of the audits. We want to know that certification that goes on in Chicago, for instance, is providing the same results as a certification that might be going on in Tokyo. And this international program of integrity ensures that. I'm going to talk a little bit about that next. And we also have a global markets program, which is another global program which is aimed at small and medium-sized programs that are not so sophisticated that they can achieve GFSI certification at this point, but allows them to get on the ladder in order to achieve certification. So a little bit about the integrity program. It's based around the recognition of certification bodies. As I mentioned, we're working with over 50 certification bodies And there is a procedure before a certification body can offer FSSC 22000. It has to go through a process to become licensed. It has to be accredited by a recognized accreditation body, and it has to show its capacity to be able to offer FSSC 22000 before it becomes licensed. Once it's licensed, it's listed on the website and is able to offer FSSC. But once it's licensed, it's within our integrity program. So we have a process of monitoring the activity. We review the scope. We have the capacity to do that virtually through the database. We also have a process of going out to audit the CBs. So while a certification body will be visiting facilities to conduct audits, as a scheme owner and a manager of the integrity program, we will also visit the certification bodies, and we will review how they are conducting the audits to make sure that everything is consistent, that they're meeting our requirements. So that adds to the confidence of the FSSC certification. So if as a customer, you're receiving a FSSC certified, if you're receiving products from an FSSC certified manufacturer, then you know you should have confidence in that manufacturer. And we have a process of monitoring their performance. If there is issues, we will go out and witness an audit with the CB. And then every year we have a harmonization day where all our CBs have to come to get harmonized, updated, and maintain communication and transparency with us. So it's a whole program, as I say, for audit reliability and consistency. So the other thing that I mentioned was the FSSC 22000 Global Markets Program. And this is a new program that's in line with the GFSI Global Markets Program. And it's a starter program in order to get companies on the road to certification. So a company that is small, just starting out, producing artisan products, that wants to compete in the market, can get on the road for certification. And we provide self-evaluation tool, which provides the beginnings of training to develop a HACCP program and good manufacturing practices. And then we have a series of assessors that will provide a conformity statement. In order to meet the Global Markets Program, you won't be certified, but you will have a certificate of conformity, which many vendors will recognize. And so that gives you a leg up onto the rung of the supply chain. And we call it a pathway for FSSC 22000 in order to allow the small and medium companies, or even a large company that has an unsophisticated management program, to develop and improve their food safety system. It's a stepping stone. It goes through a process of training and assessment, and there's a foundation level which you can stay at to just be and receive a statement of Global Markets Foundation level conformance, or from there you can go on to an intermediate level and ultimately achieve FSSC 22000. So as I mentioned, it's possible to remain at the foundation level. The conformity assessments have to be issued by approved assessment bodies, which are on the website. And it's a tool for vendors to recognize small companies and allows market access for companies that are on the ladder. We have a register on the website for those organizations that are conforming, and it also contributes a tool for the assessor training, again, which is on the ladder for continued programs and certification. So achieving certification, what does achieving certification achieve? It allows for the integration. Using FSSC 22000 with its ISO 22000 framework allows for the integration of your food safety management system with other risk-based management systems. So this is the appreciation of the ongoing benefits of using the ISO systems, the risk-based management systems, which would be, so if you are already using ISO 14001, for instance, for environmental management, or 45001 for occupational health and safety, or the new ISO systems for information security management. Quality is an obvious one that we integrate with 9001. You can integrate your food safety management with these to improve the efficiency by reducing costs and audit time, and just improving really the risk management of the company. FSSC 22000 also works to contribute to the transparency and harmonization in the food supply chain. GFSI is doing a great job of improving the harmonization. Combined with ISO 22000 takes it to another level for harmonization in the food supply chain. And the management system promotes continuous improvement, contributing to reduced public health and lower food safety incidences. And from our point of view, our goal is improve food safety and consumer confidence worldwide. And we hope that we are doing this. We hope that you understand now a little bit more about how we're doing it. And if you should need any more information, then please don't hesitate to contact us. I'm available. I'm based in the US, in the DC area. And we also have the head office, which is open when I'm not, that can be reached at info@FSSC 22000. So with that, I'm going to call it a day. If you have any questions, I would be pleased to answer them. Feel free to email them to me at jsubby@fssc22000.com or to our info email address. But I would also suggest please view the website for additional information. I appreciate your time, and I understand that the webinar is going to be recorded. If you want a recording of the webinar to share, then it will be made available to you. Thank you very much for your time.